There's a war happening right now. A quiet, invisible war that no one talks about in church lobbies or over coffee after Sunday service. It doesn't scream through a megaphone or show up with flashing warning signs. No, it creeps in silently, softly, often in the darkest moments of isolation, in the quiet between worship songs, in the silence after fervent prayers. And the strange, almost unspoken truth is this: the ones who are called, the ones anointed, the ones burning with divine purpose, those are often the ones who suffer the most brutal battles with lust. Why is that? Why is it that the men and women set apart for God's greatest callings often find themselves entangled in the fiercest temptations? Why does it feel like the closer someone walks with God, the louder the whisper of the flesh becomes? It's not coincidence. It's not weakness. It's not failure stamped on their soul. It's strategy, a spiritual ambush crafted in darkness. Think about it. Think about the ones who stood closest to God's fire in Scripture. David, the beloved shepherd king, the man after God's own heart, found himself collapsing in the grip of desire when he saw Bathsheba bathing on that rooftop. It didn't happen when he was lost or wandering. It happened when he was already known, already chosen, already crowned. Then there's Samson, mighty and called from birth, his strength legendary, yet undone by a single woman whose name still echoes through sermons: Delilah. These weren't just slip-ups. These were calculated strikes by an enemy who knew exactly where to aim. And that same enemy is still aiming. Right now, maybe you've felt it too, that strange, almost suffocating pull. You're praying, fasting, preaching, serving, doing everything you know how to walk in God's purpose. And yet, there's a shadow that follows you. A pressure that grows when you're alone, when the room is dark, when the applause fades and it's just you and your thoughts. Feels shameful, feels dirty, feels like you must be the only one. But you're not. You're far from alone. What if I told you that lust, in these cases, isn't just a physical temptation? What if it's a spiritual assault, tailored and timed to interrupt your calling before it fully manifests? What if it's not about sex at all, but sabotage? Because here's what no one wants to admit out loud. The enemy doesn't waste his ammunition. He doesn't go after those who pose no threat. He zeroes in on the ones marked by God, the ones carrying vision, the ones who could shift generations if they walked in purity and power. Lust is not random. It's intentional. It's targeted. It's crafted as a snare to distract, delay, and ultimately destroy destiny. And the battlefield is rarely public. No one sees the pastor fighting images in the quiet hours before Sunday's sermon. No one hears the worship leader crying on the floor, ashamed after another fall. No one notices the young prophet deleting messages they should have never answered. Because the most dangerous war is the one fought behind closed doors, under spiritual cover, masked by smiles and ministry. There's something almost cruel about it, the way lust attacks with familiarity. It doesn't come roaring like a lion. It whispers, it suggests, it justifies. It comes wrapped in loneliness, in emotional exhaustion, in unmet needs. Pretends to offer connection when your soul is starving. It offers false intimacy, counterfeit comfort. It gives just enough pleasure to numb the pain, just enough escape to keep you from facing the real wounds that never healed. And once you've tasted it, it doesn't let go easily. It wraps itself around your identity like shame, convincing you that you can't be holy and broken at the same time, that you can't lead and limp, that God might love you, but he definitely can't use you anymore. That's the lie. That's the hook. But what if the very presence of that battle is evidence of something deeper, something powerful? What if the intensity of your struggle is a clue that you're carrying something the enemy fears? That you were never meant to be average, never meant to blend in, never meant to live a life of compromise? What if your war with lust isn't a sign of failure, but of significance? Some of the greatest spiritual callings come with the heaviest weights, and the enemy knows that if he can burden your soul with guilt and hide your fire under shame, he doesn't need to extinguish your purpose. He only needs to dim it. He only needs you to stop believing you're worthy. He only needs you to sit down and stay quiet. But what he fears most is that one day you'll rise, that you'll stop hiding, that you'll call the battle what it is, a spiritual attack, and you'll start to fight differently. Maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you clicked on this not because you're curious, but because your soul recognized itself in these words. You know the war, you feel it, and somewhere inside you want to believe it's not the end, that there's a way out, that this story isn't over. Let me tell you something bold, something true, something holy. It isn't over. Your struggle is real, but so is your calling. And no matter how loud the battle becomes, God's voice is louder. His grace runs deeper. His power is stronger. You are not the sin you struggle with. You are not the thoughts that torment you. You are chosen, you are called, and you are not alone. The question is, will you face the war, or keep pretending it's not there? There's a reason why some people seem to carry an invisible weight, a kind of pressure that no one sees but they feel every day. They wake up with purpose burning in their chest and yet feel like chains are wrapped around their spirit. They have dreams from God, visions that stir their soul. But then, in the quiet, a darker struggle whispers their name. The more they try to rise, the harder they feel pulled down. It's not random. It's not weakness. It's not because they're broken beyond repair. It's because the enemy is threatened by what they carry. And lust, among all weapons, is one of the enemy's most precisely aimed arrows. When someone is spiritually sensitive, they don't just hear the voice of God more clearly, they feel the atmosphere around them shift. They're tuned in, aware of the unseen realm in ways that others aren't. But that heightened awareness cuts both ways. It means they also feel the tug of temptation more acutely. They don't just see the trap, they feel it before it even shows up. And sometimes that sensitivity turns into torment, because the enemy studies those who are set apart. He crafts the bait with detail. He doesn't tempt randomly, he tempts specifically. Lust becomes more than just a physical urge. It's a spiritual strategy designed to weaken their discernment, to cloud their clarity, to dull their hunger for God. Then comes the isolation. Many of those called by God find themselves on paths no one else seems to understand. They walk alone, not because they want to, but because the calling on their life has separated them. And in that separation, a dangerous silence creeps in. It's in the silence that temptations speak the loudest. Not because the person is weak, but because they're human. And without authentic accountability, without someone who sees beyond the surface, the battle with lust becomes something hidden, something shameful. It thrives in secrecy. The enemy knows that a battle fought in the dark is harder to win. That's why he isolates before he attacks. And if you've ever felt that, you know exactly what I mean. You've stood on platforms. You've prayed over people. You've heard God speak through you. But when you go home, when the lights are off and the door is closed, a different battle begins. One no one sees. And the higher your calling, the more violent the attack. The enemy isn't fighting your past, he's fighting your future. The greater the potential in you, the greater the pressure sent against you. Not to destroy you immediately, but to slowly erode your confidence, your intimacy with God, your inner strength. Some people carry deep emotional wounds, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and even though they preach healing, they themselves are still bleeding internally. Lust doesn't always show up because someone wants to sin. Sometimes it shows up as a counterfeit comfort, an escape from the ache they don't know how to name. In those moments, lust offers a false promise. Connection, intimacy, relief, but it's a lie dressed in familiarity. The problem is, once it gives you that brief escape, it hands you shame in return. Then the cycle begins. Hurt, escape, shame. Again and again until you start to wonder if you'll ever break free. And let's not forget, spiritual gifts don't cancel out human weakness. You can hear from God and still battle your flesh. You can be anointed and still be tempted. The more gifted someone is, the more intentional their discipline needs to be. Without prayer, fasting, and daily surrender, the flesh will start taking control. Not because you're a hypocrite, not because you don't love God, but because without feeding your spirit, your flesh becomes louder. Lust doesn't always show up at your worst. Sometimes it shows up right after a spiritual high, when you've just had breakthrough, just preached a powerful word, just come down from the mountain. This isn't a message of condemnation. It's a warning wrapped in compassion. Because the ones who are chosen often don't realize how closely they're being watched. The enemy doesn't waste effort. He reserves his most seductive, most destructive weapons for those who are carrying real light. And his goal isn't just to get you to fall. It's to get you to stop rising. Let me tell you a story. There was a young minister, full of fire, full of vision. People admired his gift. He had a way of speaking that made heaven feel near. But no one knew the battle he fought nightly. It didn't start as sin. It started as a way to cope. Loneliness turned to curiosity. Curiosity turned to secrecy. And before long, he found himself trapped in a world he couldn't talk about. Every time he tried to break free, guilt screamed louder. He kept serving, kept smiling, but inside he felt like a fraud. Until one night he broke. Not in shame, but in surrender. He cried out, not a perfect prayer, just a raw one. And that night everything changed. Not because he became flawless, but because he stopped pretending and started fighting. That's what this is about. Not pretending, not hiding. If you're called, you're a target. And if you're targeted, you need to be equipped. You need to know why the war feels so heavy. Because it is. But you also need to know this. The one in you is greater than the one against you. You're not struggling because you're weak. You're struggling because you're chosen. There comes a moment when every chosen one has to decide what kind of story their life will tell. Will it be a story of quiet compromise, buried behind closed doors, masked by ministry and muted by shame? Or will it be a story of breakthrough? A story that says, yes, I was fought hard, but by the grace of God, I didn't stay down. Because the truth is, lust doesn't have to have the final word. No matter how long the battle has raged, no matter how many times you've fallen, there is a path out. There is a way forward. There is healing, power, and freedom, but it won't come through hiding. It begins with facing the fight with honesty, with intention, and with divine help. You can't conquer what you continue to coddle. Victory starts with calling lust what it is. A spiritual attack meant to silence the purpose of God in your life. When you recognize it as war, you stop responding with excuses and start responding with weapons. And those weapons are not carnal, they're spiritual. Prayer that breaks chains, fasting that weakens the flesh, scripture that renews the mind, accountability that exposes darkness. You don't defeat lust by simply wishing it away. You defeat it by getting aggressive about guarding your spirit. You create new patterns. You build walls around your heart. You interrupt the cycle with radical obedience. This is what the enemy fears. Not that you struggle, but that you start fighting back with spiritual authority. And part of that authority comes through vulnerability. Real freedom doesn't grow in the soil of secrecy. It grows in light. That's why community matters. God never meant for you to fight alone. You weren't designed to be a lone warrior. Isolation is a tactic of the enemy, but intimacy with others, real, spiritual, honest connection, is a gift from God. Find someone who can handle the weight of your truth. Someone who doesn't flinch when you confess, but fights with you in prayer. Healing often walks through the door of confession. It's in that sacred space that the shame begins to lose its grip. But there's another piece many overlook. Healing isn't just about resisting the behavior. It's about addressing the wound beneath it. Lust often rushes in where pain hasn't been touched. If you've been rejected, abandoned, betrayed, those are open doors. Not because you're dirty, but because you're human. And God, in His kindness, doesn't just want you to resist sin. He wants to heal your heart. He wants to take you back to the moment it first broke and speak peace into it. When you let Him into the wound, lust loses its power. It no longer becomes the drug you reach for in the dark. Because you're no longer bleeding, you're whole. You see, holiness is not just about avoiding what's wrong. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. It's walking in purity not out of fear, but out of identity. You're not a slave to your flesh. You're not a prisoner of your past. You're a son. You're a daughter. And the Spirit of God lives in you. That means you have the authority to say no. You have the power to walk away. You have the grace to start again. Every single time. His mercy is not a one-time offer. It's a daily invitation. Some of you are listening to this, and your heart is pounding because you know this is your story. You've been in the battle. Maybe no one else knows, but God knows. And He's not looking at you with disappointment. He's looking at you with compassion, with power in His hands, ready to lift you up. He's not ashamed of you. He's ready to restore you. But you have to choose. You have to decide that the fight is worth it, that your calling is worth protecting, that your future is worth more than a moment of pleasure. This isn't just about resisting lust. It's about reclaiming your purpose. The enemy wants you so buried in shame that you forget who you are. But I came to remind you, you are not your mistake. You are not your failure. You are not the moment you gave in. You are who God says you are, set apart, chosen, anointed. And He is not done with you yet. There will be moments when the temptation feels stronger than your willpower. That's when you have to remember you're not fighting alone. The Spirit of God is with you. Heaven backs you. You're not called to survive this struggle, you're called to overcome it. And every time you say no, every time you turn away, every time you get back up after falling, you are proving that your calling is greater than your craving. You are reminding hell that you may have been targeted, but you are not defeated. So rise. Don't stay down. Don't settle for a life half-lived, half-free. There is more. God has more. And if you choose to fight, if you choose to surrender daily, to stay close to His voice, you will overcome. Not by your strength, but by His Spirit. Because in the end, lust is loud, but God's voice is louder. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. You've come too far to turn back now. The chains can break. The cycle can stop. Your heart can be healed. Your purpose can be fulfilled. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of your comeback.